Have you ever felt like a prisoner of your own emotions? Like a queen with a brilliant mind and limitless potential, yet somehow held captives by invisible chains of feelings that seem to have a life of their own? Well, in today's video, I'm going to show you how to transform your reactive emotions into intuitive wisdom, the sacred art of emotional alchemy that our ancestors understood but modern society has forgotten. Stay with me because I'll share the exact framework that helped me go from emotional overwhelm to emotional sovereignty, and how it can transform your relationships, career, and inner peace in ways you never thought possible. Picture this: you're lying awake at 3 a.m., your chest tight with anxiety about tomorrow's presentation. Your mind races between perfectionist preparation and catastrophic what ifs. By morning, you're exhausted before you even begun. Later that week, a thoughtless comment from a colleague triggers a tidal wave of anger that you swallow down, only to have it erupt at home over something insignificant. The cycle continues: emotional storms followed by the shame of losing control, followed by rigid self discipline that eventually cracks under pressure. The cost? Relationships sustained by unpredictable reactions, opportunities missed because fear spoke louder than desire, intuition drowned out by emotional noise, and beneath it all, a soul level exhaustion from living disconnected from your personal truth. As women in today's world, we face an impossible emotional paradox. We're expected to be vulnerable yet unshakable, nurturing yet ambitious, emotionally intelligent yet never too emotional. Traditional advice fails us spectacularly, either suggesting we just be logical, which means denying our emotional wisdom, or fully express everything, without acknowledging the real world consequences in professional and personal spaces. Science confirms what we already intuitively know: women's brains process emotional information differently. Research from Stanford University shows that women's limbic systems have stronger connections to areas controlling verbal expression and memory formation than man's brains do. This isn't a weakness, it's a different kind of power that society has taught us to doubt. But thankfully, there is another way. Imagine transforming your reactive emotions into intuitive wisdom. Picture yourself navigating emotional currents with grace instead of being tossed about by every wave. Envision honoring the depth of your feelings while maintaining sovereign choice over how you express and channel them. This is emotional alchemy, the sacred art of transmuting raw emotion into golden wisdom and power. The journey I'm about to share with you isn't about controlling your emotions or expressing them heedlessly. It's about creating a conscious, sacred relationship with your emotional landscape, one that honors the ancient feminine wisdom your feelings contain while cultivating the sovereignty to choose how that wisdom manifests in your life. Section 1: The Forgotten Language of Emotions. Long before emotions became something to manage or control, ancient wisdom traditions recognized them as divine messengers. In Greek mythology, emotions were embodied as goddesses. And because I'm terrible at pronouncing names, here are some of the goddesses and the emotions that they are contributed to, each carrying unique gifts and teachings. This ancient understanding surpasses our modern corporate definitions of emotional intelligence. True emotional wisdom isn't just recognizing feelings, but receiving their messages with reverence. Dr. Candace Pert, whose groundbreaking research identified the biomolecular basis for emotions, described emotions as the body's way of translating mind into matter. Her work confirmed what mystic traditions have always known: every emotion you experience exists for a reason. Fear evolved to alert you to threats and protect your boundaries. Anger signals violation and mobilizes energy for change. Sadness helps you release what no longer serves and opens you up to compassion. Joy guides you towards what nourishes your soul and connects you to others. When I first began my journey towards emotional sovereignty, I dismissed my anxiety as weakness, fought my anger as unfeminine, and forced positivity over sadness. It wasn't until a profound burnout left me unable to function that I finally listened to what these emotional messengers had been trying to tell me. My work environment was toxic, which was fear. My boundaries were being violated, anger. And I was grieving time lost to a path that wasn't mine, sadness. The wisdom was always there, I just hadn't learned to listen to it. Our emotional lives are far more complex than simply positive and negative feelings. Psychologists distinguish between primary emotions, which are the core emotions we're born with, and secondary emotions, which are the protective layers we develop in response to how our primary emotions were received. For example, if your childhood anger was met with punishment, you might develop a secondary shame around anger. If your sadness was dismissed, you might cover it up with a secondary emotion of detachment. This complexity is further shaped by cultural conditioning that teaches women to value certain emotions over others. Research from the Yale Center of Emotional Intelligence found that professional women who express anger face significantly more negative consequences than their male counterparts. No wonder we learn to hide certain feelings even from ourselves. And perhaps the most powerful are what Carl Jung psychology came up with that is called the shadow emotions. These powerful feelings society has deemed inappropriate for the good woman: righteous anger, fierce ambition, primal desire, and holy rage. These emotions, when reclaimed, become the fuel for your transformation, boundary setting, and authentic power. Section 2 is the sacred pause. The key to emotional sovereignty isn't controlling what you feel, it's creating sacred space between the feeling and your response to it. Neuroscience confirms that an emotional response typically lasts around 90 seconds in the body if we simply observe it without feeding it its thoughts. To help picture this, imagine your emotions as weather patterns moving through the sky of your consciousness. You are not the storm, you are the vast sky that witnesses the storm. Here's a practice I want you to try after this video. When an emotion arises strongly, place one hand on your heart and one on your belly. Take 3 deep breaths, naming the emotion without judgment. Example: I notice anger is present. This creates the sacred pause, the space between stimulus and response where your power lives. Your body speaks the language of emotions fluently, a language that you can learn. Each emotion creates a unique sensation pattern in physical form. Anxiety often appears as chest tightness, shallow breathing, or stomach butterflies. Anger manifests as jaw tension, heat rising, and fists clenched. Sadness shows up as heaviness on the chest, throat constriction, or fatigue. Joy bubbles up as a lightness, expansiveness, and energy. These are just some examples, and anxiety can show up completely different from person to person. These are just general guidelines. The words we use to describe our emotional states directly impact our ability to process them. Research on emotional granularity, the ability to precisely identify feelings, shows that people with more specific emotional vocabulary demonstrates greater resilience and psychological flexibility. Instead of saying, I'm stressed, try identifying the specific emotional blend. I'm feeling overwhelmed about my workload, disappointed in myself for not setting boundaries early, and anxious about meeting the deadline. The next section is the emotional sovereignty framework. True emotional mastery follows a sacred framework that honors feelings while maintaining sovereign choice. It's a very quick framework consisting of 4 parts. The first part is validation. Acknowledge what you are feeling without judgment. Next is to excavate. Mine the emotion for its wisdom. Third is discernment. Separate the message from the messenger. 4 is sovereign choice. Decide how to honor the emotion's message in a way that serves your highest good. For example, when you feel anger, you can say, I notice anger is arising. This anger is showing me that my boundary has been crossed. The wisdom in this anger is valid, even if how it wants to express isn't aligned with my highest self. I am feeling angry. I am not anger. I will protect my boundary with clear communication rather than reactive words. This process transforms raw emotional energy into conscious power. Biochemistry is fascinating. Regulated emotional processing activates the prefrontal cortex, which is your brain's wisdom center, while soothing the amygdala, which is your alarm system, creating a state of centered clarity. Even with practice, there will be times when emotions just feel super overwhelming, and the key is staying present rather than trying to escape the intensity. When emotions do feel too intense, focus on physical sensations rather than the emotional story. Name 5 things you can feel physically: tingling in my hands, tightness in my throat, heat in my face, etc. This grounds you in the present rather than spiraling into past patterns or future fears. The emotions we've been taught to reject often hold our greatest power. Carl Jung noted, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. This is particularly true for women whose anger, ambition, sexuality, and power have been systematically shadowed by cultural conditioning. The next section is wielding your emotional magic in daily life. How you start your day sets the emotional tone for what follows. So create a morning ritual that establishes your sovereignty before engaging with the world's demands. You can simply begin with a body scan to identify what emotions are present without trying to change them. Set an emotional intention for the day. Not how you want to feel, but how you want to relate to your feelings today. For example, today I commit to noticing when anxiety arises and creating space before responding. For communications that might trigger emotional intensity, you can use this template. When situation occurs, I feel emotion because need is important to me. Would you be willing to request? This structure allows emotional honesty while maintaining professional boundaries. Our relationships often trigger our most intense emotional reactions because they touch our deepest attachment patterns, yet they also offer the richest opportunities for emotional alchemy. Creating relationship containers that honor both autonomy and connection require clear agreements. Consider establishing some emotional safety practices with the important people in your life. Asking questions like how we will signal when we're emotionally flooded, what helps each other return to center, how can we support without trying to fix each other's emotions. The next section is all about the digital age emotional mastery. Our digital lives create unprecedented emotional challenges. Research from MIT shows that social media triggers comparison responses in the brain similar to those activated during an in-person social threat. Create intentional digital boundaries that support your emotional sovereignty. Consider cultivating feeds to limit exposure to content that triggers unhelpful emotional patterns. Scheduling specific times for social media rather than constant availability. Removing social apps from your phone for designated periods. Or practicing the RAIN technique before posting emotionally charged content. Recognize the emotion, allow it to be there, investigate its source, non-identify. Remember, you are not your emotion. One of the greatest challenges of modern emotional mastery is maintaining embodied presence in an increasingly disembodied digital world. The key is consciously weaving between these realms rather than being pulled unconsciously between them. Earth-honoring practices support emotional regulation while acknowledging our interconnection with the planet. Try forest bathing, barefoot walking on natural surfaces, or simply sitting with your back against a tree during emotionally intense periods. The journey from emotional captivity to sovereignty is not linear, it's spiral. True emotional mastery isn't rigid control, but conscious relationship. A beautiful dance with your feelings rather than a battle against them. As you practice the language of learning your emotions, you'll discover that emotions you once feared become your greatest teachers. The anger you avoided reveals your fierce capacity to protect what matters. The grief you resisted opens channels of compassion. The joy you deemed frivolous becomes a revolutionary act of presence. Remember that your emotional mastery isn't just personal, it's collective. In a world that has systematically disconnected women from their emotional wisdom and power, your journey of reclamation creates a ripple far beyond your individual experience. Each time you honor an emotion without being consumed by it, you help heal centuries of feminine emotional repression. You are the alchemist of your emotional experience, transforming the raw material feelings into gold wisdom, the silver of boundaries, and the precious gems of authentic connection. So, what emotion is asking for your attention right now? What wisdom might it be carrying? How might honoring this message, while choosing its expression, transform your life? Share your emotional mastery journey with our community down in the comments or in our Facebook group that you can find in the description box below, where you will meet other women who are taking the brave choice to become their best ideal self. Remember, sister, your emotions are not weaknesses to overcome, but sacred messengers carrying the wisdom you need to create the life your soul desires. The question isn't whether you'll feel deeply, it's whether those feelings will be your prisoner or your power. The choice is yours. And as you're on this journey, please know that I believe in you, sweet soul, and I'm so proud of you for taking the steps to reclaim your life. And until we meet again, I am wishing you happiness, clarity, and control. And until next time, guys, peace.